I am wanted to kind of just, let's talk about JavaScript. Let's talk about JavaScript and FileMaker. I'll go through some of the stuff that I've been doing as far as some learning path stuff. But if it's just the five of us, we can talk because you guys have, or at least you, David, you've created some add-ons already using some JavaScript stuff. So it might be fun to just kind of chat about what we're doing in JavaScript and FileMaker. Has everybody, David, you and your group have created add-ons, right? With some JavaScript stuff, right?
Yeah, I've got to try it on the very latest version of FileMaker that was just released. The earlier versions, there were some issues building the add-on, but essentially we've gone through the process and just have to hit the go button again once the things are fixed in there. But it might be fixed in that release that came out last week. We've got to test that still.
Yeah, we can talk through that. How about the rest of us? I'm trying to...
I have not yet.
You have not? No. Have you done any JavaScript stuff at all?
Not with FileMaker, but I've done JavaScript. Right. I've coded in JavaScript for some things.
And Thomas, you're working on some stuff too, right?
Yep.
Thomas, what are y'all working on?
A little tags kind of interface. I'm trying to think of places I've seen them besides blogs, but when you add tags to things, it's usually just kind of a box. Almost like a checkbox, but you click in it and then you're like in an entry field and you just type it and hit enter and it's just like boom.
Okay.
And it adds it to a list, but they all kind of clump up to the other upper left and you can just keep adding like that. And so it's a interface that will let you add tags like that and then call scripts every time you add a tag to either update a field or you run a script to do whatever you want. They have a delete button, which will also run a script. And then you can turn that interactivity actually on or off in case you want to do that to FileMaker for some reason and just display it. Mm-hmm. And also some functions just to grab whatever happens to be in there at the time.
Are you using JavaScript at all?
Yes, it's all JavaScript.
Okay, great.
And HTML, all that good stuff. But yeah.
So you have a decent background on working in JavaScript, right?
No, just this thing.
All right, good. Well, we can talk through that stuff. It's just for some reason I'm on here twice, so it's interesting as the presenter. Oh, it's my presentation. Okay. So I'm gonna let's try to do this again. It's just I can't see you if. Yeah, I don't like that. Sorry, I'm going to just go with this here because I can't see you guys. So what I want to talk about today is just using JavaScript and FileMaker, just taking a look at what is in the JavaScript language and finding what is useful in FileMaker. I call it a defined way forward for FileMaker developers, and we'll get into the reasons why. This is me. These are my dogs. That's my wonderful house in Florida. So I love it. Love it here. I really have a lot to talk about, stuff that we can take a look at. We can just chat about together, specific questions that we all have about any of this stuff. I put on here the add-ons that are in FileMaker 19, the latest update. I've been writing a lot of blog posts about them, and I actually, with Todd, we built them for Claris. So I'm interested. If we want to, we can talk through some of that stuff as well, and just get a feel for how these add-ons were built. And then I'd actually love to hear from all of us the idea of configuration. I'm doing a presentation at FM Disc on Friday about add-ons, and I'm generating ideas about how people set up configurations for add-ons so that you can apply them to any fields or whatever the case may be. So we can talk through that when we get there. So JavaScript is now part of FileMaker. There's no getting around it anymore. When I started this gig, when I started working in JavaScript, I got a lot of pushback from the place that I was working and from specific people about this, because they felt like JavaScript was not really part of FileMaker. And I don't know if any of you saw it, but I wrote a blog post here at Geist Interactive called Native FileMaker, and we talked about in that JavaScript is part of FileMaker. I've since then become known as the native FileMaker guy because I wrote that, and every once in a while people bring up that idea. But I guess for me it was like I had only been in FileMaker maybe 6 years at that point when I started to study the JavaScript stuff. So I guess I wasn't holding on to a lot of baggage of working with FileMaker. Have you all been in FileMaker many years?
Not many. About two and a half.
Two? Thomas?
I'm not sure at this point. A while.
Yeah. It's been a while. Yep.
Okay.
Since 12.
Since 12? Yeah, me too. I started
Or
in 12.
like years ago. No, it's more than 4 years.
I started
5
in 9. You started in 12? Okay.
I first worked in 9, but 12 was out.
Okay. So I guess I didn't have a lot of baggage of like everything has to be done in FileMaker. I was always interested in exploring new and different ideas. And of course, with FileMaker 19, we have so much more that just really kind of seals the deal for using JavaScript and FileMaker. And David, when did you start using JavaScript? Before FileMaker 19 or after that?
In FileMaker, probably. I mean, I guess a little bit of stuff in FileMaker beforehand, because the only really way you could get data back into FileMaker was kind of through the FMP URLs, which was a little clunky sometimes.
Yeah.
So I definitely used it in some solutions with the FMP URLs, but not very much, just because there's some limitations, and you couldn't use that at all on WebDirect.
Yeah.
You know? So,
Thomas, the work that you've done has been primarily in the last couple of years. Obviously, if you've been doing JavaScript, if you've been only in FileMaker for a certain number of years, FileMaker 19, yeah, okay. FileMaker 19 just gives us all of the tools necessary for it. We have a new script step that allows us to invoke a function that is written in the JavaScript and we can pass it in parameters if we want. Down here, we have the opposite of that. We have a JavaScript function, and even a new one as of this week, last week actually, that we can call a FileMaker script. Here's an event script in FileMaker. We can call that and we can pass it data. And of course, we have the add-ons, which was just released last week. So all of this stuff is part of FileMaker. It's now baked in. And all of this works in all parts of the platform too. All of the add-ons that we built work in WebDirect as well as Go. So there's really just no use for getting around it anymore, I think. I mean, on the other hand, I say things like that, but then I have never worked with the execute SQL script step. Don't know how it works. I barely use ODBC. I think I've used it once in my time. There's a lot of the platform that I haven't used, but I think JavaScript is the place to go, is the way to go, because it does provide these nice interfaces that we can't build. And David, you have a great accordion kind of thing, or expanding portals, right? Extra details within a kind of a portal looking thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Couldn't be done without JavaScript and the new FileMaker JavaScript interface.
Yeah. So as a FileMaker developer, this is what I've come to the conclusion that more FileMaker developers are exploring JavaScript. There's just, in fact, I see a ton of questions now. Here's in the community, they have this like little slider thing that shows you the number of posts for a specific keyword like JavaScript, as this is JavaScript. And most of the questions have come in the past, just a couple years. If I were to go in there today, I'm sure that there would be even more. So FileMaker developers out there are really exploring it. they're asking these questions: what should I learn, and where should I learn it? I think for me, these are very. I didn't know anything JavaScript at all. It sounds like, David, you all had some JavaScript experience out of FileMaker. Is that right?
Yeah, doing web applications.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah.
That's like half our business these days too. So we're like half web, half FileMaker. So this has been a
more
good
than half.
yeah. This has been a
At
good.
the moment.
This has been a good way to get these two pieces mixing a little more.
Yeah, that's good. Did you know JavaScript before Blue Feather, or before you started working there, or were you learning it in school or using it outside of?
I didn't learn it in school or anything. It was just projects come up and you do things, and as you're doing more and more on the web, you end up using JavaScript more for front end things. So kind of just knowledge picks up over time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so the now that it's part of the platform even more, we have to think about what should I learn and where should I learn it. And to answer the second question, there's a ton of places out there to learn. These are just some of them, but these are complete packages. These are like Westboss and Udemy, and all of these are going to teach us everything there is to know about JavaScript. And that's fine if you got the time. I found this a couple months ago. I found this complete JavaScript path that someone nicely drew up. Whoever did this said, if you want to start with the front end, if you want to learn front end development, these are the things that I recommend, or is my opinion. These are some alternatives and color coded and stuff like that. So he started with this stuff, HTML, that's a lot of stuff. CSS, I mean, that's one box is a heck of a lot. But then, it keeps going. There's more. Basic usage of get, package manager, NPM, yarn. See this stuff, there's a lot of stuff here. Here's even more. Style components, modules, React Strap, what is that? Material UI, Tailwind, I got that. And it just keeps on going. So as a web developer, those of the people who are focusing on just the web, this is great. This is a great path that's well defined. But FileMaker developers, we don't really have time or the energy to learn all that stuff right away. We have so much to do already in FileMaker. I don't know about you, but at the end of the day, I'm too shot to do any more learning. So it's really tough to focus on anything. Hi, Dave. Welcome. To focus on anything that is outside of exactly what I need to accomplish. And again, time is just, it's at a premium. It's very limited. I have 3 dogs and a foster dog that just demand my time. So I don't have time to go through every single one of these and learn enough about them to be, to use in my FileMaker work. So I arrived at what I think is a good solution, and all of you have some JavaScript experience. It'd be great to hear what you all have to say about this. I don't think that every FileMaker developer needs to learn all there is to know in JavaScript. I don't see a benefit necessarily in going through all of the Westboss courses when we're getting started using JavaScript in FileMaker, because FileMaker has in my mind, FileMaker has a very limited view of the JavaScript language. If we talk about schema, we can we can look at it via a relationship and say, from the FileMaker table, what can I see into the JavaScript table? What is my relationship there? What limited found set of records is available from FileMaker? So we don't have to learn every single thing about JavaScript to be successful in FileMaker. So here's what I have put together as my proposition. You may have seen this. I've written a couple blog posts about it. and this is kind of like all that I think about now, is what in JavaScript can help us in FileMaker right away. Starting at FileMaker, what do we do in FileMaker every day or very often? And what JavaScript things will help us to do that work? So like the first one up here is performing actions. As FileMaker developers, we build layouts, we build buttons, we build script triggers, we build hide calcs, we build all this stuff because we want the user to be able to interact with the data, to be able to perform actions. Well, JavaScript has the same ability, right? So we can talk about that in JavaScript that helps us to do these actions. If our client says, I want to build an interface where I can fill in some fields, click a submit button, that could be a JavaScript thing. So we need to learn how to do those kinds of things. So I've identified some of the JavaScript language that will help us to do that. Same for manipulating data. Every day in JavaScript, we have to take an array or an object and we have to manipulate it somehow. With libraries, JavaScript libraries, we have to take the data from FileMaker, especially from that execute data API script step, and we have to manipulate it for a JavaScript library. So we might be using the for each function or the map function or a looping function. Maybe we want to create an add-on that has a JavaScript function that only returns some of the elements from the array that we pass to it. This kind of stuff is in JavaScript, what we can do, but it supports those actions that we need to do in FileMaker. And the other three that I have are load data and retrieve data, and then update the layout, the screen. So we'll take a look at this in a minute here. The purpose of this is to focus our attention on what we need. It keeps our learning tied to what we normally would do in FileMaker. Again, create buttons that create a navigation system. We could do that in JavaScript. We need to learn how to create buttons and do all that stuff that supports that use case. And to me, this stuff that we can focus on gives us our biggest return on investment. We can do the most, the quickest. If we understand how to write a function and how to then call that function, that's a long way into the work that we do, into being successful and having a nice JavaScript something that people can interact with. So this is the learning path. These are the things, again, that we break down. And once I've identified these, again, I think about the JavaScript that can support these. And of course, then the FileMaker stuff, like when we load code or load data, we have to use the FileMaker script step. What do you all think about this as, knowing JavaScript outside of FileMaker, knowing JavaScript inside of FileMaker? What do you see here that's, is this the right path? Are there holes in here that we need to fill in? What do you see? Anything in particular?
I think go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It makes sense to me to leverage FileMaker for its strength, which is database management. It's got a lot of interface development tools, but not as robust as JavaScript. So, and JavaScript itself is not database management software. So, it just makes sense.
Yeah, and I think there are some good ties between FileMaker data and some JavaScript utilities.
Yeah.
I think if you can get the connection working right, they're really good. So for example, like Vue handles user interface in a very similar way to FileMaker.
Mhm.
Like, we'll show and hide things by setting variables or adjusting values in fields. And Vue works in a very similar way by kind of have like a little data model that depends on that controls what shows and hides and moves around on your layout and things. It takes a little work to get those things connected, particularly with the way FileMaker does the web viewers right now, trying to get all of that kind of installed and loading locally. If you get those things connected, it's fantastic. But that's definitely a whole can of worms to open up to get into those things. But outside of that, yeah, I mean, I think this is for most basic things that someone might want to do in a web viewer. I mean, like you said, clicking buttons and loading text and loading data, and then sending the responses from the user input back to FileMaker. I mean, those are the most important things. Outside of making some sort of complex user interface stuff.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff in here that in the JavaScript language that I've skipped over. Like for arrays in particular there in the kind of the middle right, there's a lot more functions, a lot more array methods that the JavaScript language has. But as I was, in my 6 years or so now of working with JavaScript and FileMaker, and especially in building these dang add-ons for Claris, I didn't use but a handful of those things, those methods. So I figured, you know what? If I use the map function a lot, map method a lot, we should learn it as a FileMaker developer, or the filter, or the find, or the any of those. So it's yeah. And I'm taking my personal experience, honestly, because I'm not some genius FileMaker developer. I'm not a genius JavaScript developer. I'm just kind of was able to find a path, and there's a ton of JavaScript that I still don't know. Like promises are not my most understood thing, although I feel like that's something to teach nowadays. But this is the stuff that is very helpful. There are some technical things that we would have to get into, teaching about buttons and tags and IDs and classes and stuff. So there's definitely some technical stuff, but I think one of you mentioned it, that because we have FileMaker experience, we can apply some of those same skills and knowledge to this kind of stuff. Like when we talk about variables in JavaScript, we all know how variables work in FileMaker. They don't work too much differently in JavaScript. There are some definite differences, but we definitely have a place to start. Unlike promises, I don't think there's any concept in FileMaker that matches an async kind of thing or a promise kind of thing.
Perform script on servers, sort of. But
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, wait or don't wait. Yeah, you're right. So maybe, yeah. So this is the path that I encourage people to do, and I'll show you in a bit if you haven't seen it. But I do have some exercise file. I'll just bring it up now since we're not in here. I do have what I've been trying to do is generate exercises that pertain to one of those use cases. So in this learning path file, we have a kind of a setup where we write some code over here and we run it over here in there. And I don't know why it keeps doing that. And it's because it's all in there. But the goal of this is to walk through these very basic things and see it render in the web viewer if the case may be, or use the web viewer as sort of the, definitely as the JavaScript calculation engine or the JavaScript engine. So walking through this with people helps them to understand a lot of what they need to do this thing called perform actions. If they want to, if they want to create it's this one. If they want to create a simple table as a navigation, they can learn how to do it and then click on it and send that information back to FileMaker. This is really simple for us, but this is a great a great possibility, a great possible tool that someone could build, again, as a simple navigation kind of thing. But if they understand, in this case, how jQuery works to check to make sure the DOM is loaded, how this particular JavaScript function is not available to FileMaker until this stuff is loaded, and there's some crossover there. It's important to understand these concepts. So I go through in videos and people with the exercises to understand how to do this kind of stuff. In this one, I do some work with Moment.js, getting some weird Monday or the first Monday of the month, the first Tuesday of a month, or whatever. This is one that it's been fun. Where is it not? No, it's not. It's not been called. Let's see, library. I think that's right. Nope. Do I not have any data? Okay. Anyways, I don't know what's going on with this. This is supposed to help people take some data and turn it into a table so that they can learn how to use the, the for each function. Oh, that's why. Yeah, okay. Duh. So it would be show status would be library for each, and then status. I don't know. Anyway, yeah, that's right. I think that's right. So anyway, so the idea is that we work through these exercises together. We help people see how this stuff is done so that they can take this code out and they have just some basic ideas of how to create divs and how to add to them and so forth, so that they can create something on their own. So this is just a way that I'm trying to help FileMaker developers. And I'm not too sure about most things, but I feel like this is some of the more focused attempts to get into FileMaker, into JavaScript from FileMaker. Any FileMaker developer can devote some time working on those exercises and get the job done. So that's where I'm at with this. David, are you guys doing any writing about JavaScript? I know you have demonstrated your add-ons. Are you doing any, or 360 Works? Are you doing anything about that?
We haven't done any documentation or guides on how to do anything yet, but that might be a good idea to put something together.
Yeah,
Maybe we'll do that.
But we have some developers working on projects, so they might be slowly building up that documentation as they go.
Yeah, I think that's important for lots of FileMaker developers to show how easy this is getting into the platform and into the language. One of the things I do now, and I need to put together a video on this, but I like to start with this now and just say, hey, you know what? Oops, I spoiled it. No, that's fine. I found a library that looks like this. And what this library does is it generates a bar, a slider, so that I can, slide it, and I can hook it up to FileMaker, send the data back to FileMaker.
Something really funny. I think we just put this in this exact same slider library in a project that we're working on. It looks
nice.
Very similar.
Yeah, fine. The slider, no UI slider.
Yep.
Yeah. So this is what I do with people who are just learning, who are not convinced about JavaScript but are interested, especially if they come to these. I say, look, I figured this out. It took me a while, but I figured out how to create a slider, attach it to a particular div element, and to just give it some options and play with those options, and play with the styling and build one or in this case 2. So what I do is that what I think about as a FileMaker developer, I think, okay, this is cool, but I want a survey of questions. So how can I take this one slider and turn it into this, where I have one slider per question in my data set? Now this data set can come from tables. I could see it as someone clicks a button to create the survey and it grabs questions from a table, plops them into a response table, and then generates the bar chart or the sliders here. So as a FileMaker developer, how could I build this? I could have 10 different web viewers over there in here, but what I'm trying to do is account for any number of questions, right? So get rid of some questions, and then it reconfigures itself. It redoes itself so that I can put those in there. So as a FileMaker developer, how am I going to do this? So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk through all of my steps to making this work. And again, this is just my basic JavaScript knowledge in creating this stuff. So I first start by grabbing the data out of that field, using some substitution placeholder text that I've got in the HTML calc field, which is right here. This is how I've been doing it for many years now. Whatever's in the data field gets placed into this placeholder text. So the first thing I do is I put that into a variable, and I'm going to go ahead and log it to make sure that that is correct. So here's my very first step. Let's run it again. Just got lots of things going on here. Boom. All right. So now when I log it, is it catching up? Come on, gotta run. I wonder if it doesn't like that. No, that wouldn't make sense. Just make sure what's going on here. There we go. Okay, so now go back to there and say console.table, the data. There we go. Okay, so I can explain, hey, look, I took that data from that JavaScript object and I just consoled it. I viewed it in the console, and I built it into a table so I can just see, yep, it's got all the pieces to it. So that's step one. That's a good step. The next step is to use the for each function to loop through each element of the data and run this function right here. Here's a function. And according to the for each documentation, I pass it a function, and it does this one time for each of the pieces in the data set. So if I do that, it's not doing it very well when I do that, then I get, hopefully, yep, I get one console log for each of the questions. So I'm just showing people, just taking this step at a time, I'm able to generate that survey. The next step, after I've done that, I know that I have the data, is to go ahead and extract out some of the pieces of it into separate variables. So now I have name, start, and end, and I'm going to go ahead and console log that just so I can make sure I got the data. So do that. Let's see if this reload works. Boom, boom, there we go. It's a pain in the butt. All right, there we go. So I'm on my way because I'm able to extract all of the pieces that I need. Okay, that's good. Now I want to be able to create one div element for each of the questions in the table, in the data set. So here's how I did it. I just used some basic JavaScript to create some div elements, to assign them some classes, and then to set an ID so I can pull that ID out, and then eventually add it to the div element. So according to what I understand about JavaScript, for each one of the questions in my data set, I'm going to get a new div element added to the DOM, added to my screen here. So if I remove, 3 questions, I only get that many elements. There we go. Very cool. So step by step, we are building this. And then the final step is to use that library function to actually create the element, create the slider in a particular div. And again, this is inside my for each function so that it will do this one time per data set in that data variable, give it all of its steps and its options. In this case, because I have a start and an end in a variable, I can apply that to the library. So every one of them potentially could have a different start and a different end for some reason. And we can build that. So what I try to tell FileMaker developers is this took some time to figure out, but this is going to solve a lot of problems for me. It is going to be the most flexible thing I've ever built when it comes to presenting data in some sort as an add-on or as something you can put in. So you can throw any number of records at it, questions at it, and it will generate this exactly as it needs. I didn't, again, basic JavaScript skills, just isolating the pieces that I am building at a specific time, and I'm able to get that done. So this is what I hope to, as a FileMaker evangelist, I hope to teach people JavaScript and convince them that they have the time and they have the energy and they have the knowledge to get this stuff done. Because it's not they don't have to go through all of Wes Boss's courses to learn how to do this. There's 3 or 4 distinct techniques in JavaScript that we need to know, and we can build something like this. Sound good? Does that make sense?
Looks pretty cool.
I think it's convincing. Do you all think this would be convincing to somebody? You all know JavaScript, so it's kind of hard to ask, but is this more convincing?
I think so I've taken a different approach to building the JavaScript interfaces for things, which has been to build it outside of FileMaker, just in HTML, JavaScript, CSS, using an IDE or something like that. Yep. You can even use some text editors that'll do some auto completion for you and things. And then once it's in good shape, just put it in FileMaker and then just swap out placeholder data if you need to do that, or or then start triggering a data insertion from FileMaker with scripts and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's a little different from what you're doing here, where you're building it in FileMaker.
I'm only doing that as a demo. You're right, though. I would definitely take this over into VS Code and actually get it to work better there first, and then bring it over. And I think that's the next step. But honestly, David, I think VS Code is a scary app to use. And I think it would turn off a lot of people if you had to. You could do
Oh, this is definitely complex, but you can go. Yeah. I mean, there are much simpler things out there. Sure. Even something like Sublime Text. We'll do some nice JavaScript auto-completion for you and syntax highlighting. And I think just syntax highlighting, I think, is huge for making sure that you're doing things correctly, or just showing that hey, you missed a semicolon here.
Yeah, you're right. And I think as I'm writing this, I would definitely do it over there and bring it. I would bring it back in here simply because these things are so tied together. As I do actually client work and stuff, I use VS Code and I use Parcel to create a development server so that I can attach what I'm doing in VS Code into FileMaker right away. So I don't have any sort of, I can see exactly how it's going to be in FileMaker right away. But yeah, you're right. I think those are implementation details. The idea of this is to say, this is attainable by any FileMaker developer. There's 4 or 5 parts to it that you need to understand, but it's completely doable by you. So do it, So that's my goal as an evangelist here at Geist Interactive, is to help people see that they can do this stuff reasonably with a lot of success. So.
Yeah. I think pointing people to a very simple, just text editor to help with things would be good to look at too. Like Notepad++ on Windows or BB Editor Sublime on Mac.
Yep. That's my next goal, is to get people used to using those things. I think it's okay to write in a field like this until it becomes unmanageable. Like this is pretty long and it's already it's formatted horribly. There's no formatting.
Well, the worse you are at JavaScript, the newer you are, the more likely you're going to make some syntax error that it's not going to show you.
Yeah,
that's a good point. True. Yeah, that's a good point. Although, I mean, maybe that's a good thing, right? Is it's not good. I don't know. I used to be a teacher, and when I teach kids division, I wouldn't let them use the calculator. But as soon as they learn how to use division, I just said, fine, I don't care, use the calculator, because that's not the point of the next lesson. Just divide these numbers and move on.
Yeah.
So document.createElement, if you have to type that out completely, it's a good way to learn. I think it's a good way to learn. You need to use this whole method right here, this whole part. So I don't know.
Like for me, autocomplete is really beneficial, because sometimes if I'm working in something I'm unfamiliar with, things will pop up and you'll be like, oh wait, there's a method that handles this.
Good point. Yeah. Good point.
So it helps with discovery sometimes as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good idea. So I should move into some sort of code editor as soon as possible. I resisted it because I don't want that to be the point of any lessons. I don't want any IDE you have to spend hours teaching.
Oh, yeah, not like a whole IDE, but I mean, just like a really simple text editor that'll do syntax highlighting.
Sublime did really. I think Sublime even had the autocomplete, even though
for some things it might.
Yeah, I don't know that it's like a weird halfway point. An IDE and just a basic text editor.
Cool.
Another thing that I think you may want to think about as like a step two, like now that you're comfortable with this, debugging, in like in the Chrome debugger or Safari debugger, something like that, helps a lot to figure out where your problem is without having to do a whole bunch of like echo, print type things, console logs.
Damn it. Sorry.
That
sync just ran out of fucking memory again. Yeah.
Hey, we're recording here.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good thing. That
might be like a phase two. Once people get the basics down. Hey, look, there's also this cool debugger that will help you, figure out where your problems are.
Yeah,
because that is just.
Can't teach everything in a
debugger.
day.
Yeah,
you got to start somewhere, and I think this is a good start because it shows them success as soon as possible. So
yeah,
it's
kind of cool that you do have this here, like with a thing that's put together like this and doing it in FileMaker. It is kind of cool that it can show it in FileMaker right away. Because I mean, is that the difference between doing FileMaker JavaScript and just doing some JavaScript? I don't know. Is there an advantage to having it, to seeing your results in FileMaker right away?
Well, there is because you can use the JavaScript functions right away from FileMaker, whether the script call or the function or the function call. So those
you
are
don't have
some
to move things back and forth.
Yeah, and so that's why I've always started here. And people know FileMaker, right? So they're not scared by this interface, whereas other ones may take some time to get used to it. So
yeah, that's definitely true.
That's where I've come down. But you're right, I'm working on different teaching tools as well to help people start using Parcel to.
So here, look, it looks like you've got the editor here with the syntax highlighting, because I'm guessing this is where you got a web viewer.
It doesn't do any autocomplete. The autocomplete is either missing or let's do document.
Yeah, but even just syntax highlighting is huge. Like this is, I was looking at this. I like this a lot better than the one that
just
you had
the field.
before.
Yeah. This is my teaching for sure. The other one was just kind of the demonstration to say, hey, we can do this. It's not that difficult. Here's
Mhm.
here's the code. But yeah, this is how I teach it as far as getting in here, and this does the auto formatting for me. So it's
That's
real
nice too,
nice. So anyway,
Yeah, the syntax highlighting is huge. Like even just seeing that you closed your quotes properly.
yep. I'm getting a lot of errors here. I don't know why. Okay, so that's what I have to say about JavaScript. You guys I don't have to convince any of you to focus on to add JavaScript to your tool belts. I am here to help people learn, to convince them, or at least open their minds to thinking about it. So
I'd still go through and work all these exercises. If this is something you guys put out, I'd go through it and be like, hey, let me, go through all these different questions that you put in there, like how to do something, just for practice.
Yeah. I think there's good stuff in here. And what I tried to do was say, all right, here are all of the JavaScript concepts that I am using in this tutorial here. So you can click on any one of these and go to the actual documentation. And what's cool is too, when you go to one of these, it does bring up a list of the concepts that kind of apply to this particular exercise. So this is a starting off point. This is not in any way a complete thing, but I give people a more complete education by letting them go to the documentation and learning more about it. So that's what this whole FileMaker document is meant for. Eventually, I would love to rewrite this in like a React framework or something, but just haven't gotten there yet. But that's what this is about. There's a bunch of resources that people can go to and learn and pick from. And I also have, what else do I have? Oh, I have a bunch of shortcuts that you can click on and get it into your memory so that you can paste it into a particular field. So anyway, that is that.
Very cool. So this is not a thing that you have released yet, or is this released and available for people
it's
to
out
download?
there. It's let's see here, Geist. It's right here. JS-learning path, and this walks through. You can download that file that I showed, watch about how to get started, enable the debugger for OS users. And then I've got all of my videos here that people can walk through with me and do the exercise in their file. So yeah, I would welcome your attention on it, because you could point out some ideas that we could add to this, and things that we could I could do to strengthen it. So
yeah. Well, I'll definitely want to work through some of that stuff. That looks really good.
Cool. All right. Well, that's the bulk of what I would want to do. That I talk with people. I'm interested in your, if you want to transition, we can talk about the add-ons that are in the FileMaker app now.
Sure.
If
we got a couple minutes late. We're getting close to 8. But I said we are getting close to 8 o'clock here. So
okay. We usually stop at 8. Okay. Well, that's good then. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. So yeah. I'm working on some blog posts too about how these interact and how you can configure them, and ideally they work on their own with just a little bit of setup. But if anybody wants to, they can get into the scripting and see how the events script works, and just so a developer like you understands what these scripts do. So we can save that for some other time, but that's what would be next. So
I think there's a lot to learn about making add-ons. There's a lot of options, and it's not all click around and find out obvious, like most of FileMaker is. If you click on enough menus, you'll find everything.
David, before we go, how are you doing kind of a configuration thing? We have a configuration that looks like this. How are you pointing your add-on to the data fields?
So in there's two parts to it. So for the accordion tables add-on, which we haven't released yet, but like I said, we built it and we're just waiting for the actual add-on building functionality to complete successfully.
Yeah.
What happens when you bring the add-on into your solution is it brings in a whole configuration interface
Okay.
where you kind of assemble your accordion tables and point it to a layout that has a portal in it. So there's two kind of versions of the accordion tables. There's the non-add-on version, which is just you assemble some JSON and you give it to it, and it just does whatever you want. It's very flexible. You can do many layers of expanding, and it's totally customizable. The add-on version only goes down one layer, and it does that by you give it a layout that has a portal on it, and the layout becomes your main set of records, and the portal becomes your expandable set of records on there. So there's a little less customization on that. But in the configuration layout that comes in there, you just tell it those layouts, you tell it which fields you want, and then it gives you an ID for your configuration. So if maybe you have 5 different accordion tables in your solution, you're going to have accordion table 1, accordion table 2, accordion table 3. And then on the actual object that you put on the layout, you just give it a number of which accordion table you want to load, and it just checks the configuration, does whatever it needs to do in there, and then renders inside the accordion table. So on the actual layout itself, the only thing you're really putting into it is the ID of the accordion table you want to place on the layout.
That's very cool. You've demonstrated this too, haven't you?
Not the add-on functionality, just the basic
Okay.
accordion table thing. I don't know if we actually did a demo of that once we finished it. I think we showed it while it was in progress.
Okay. If you're ever interested, I can talk to you offline, but just throwing it out there, I am presenting different ideas of configuration to the FM Disk group on Friday. If I could see yours as just a way to configure, it'd be great to show different ways so that people just see how different ways there are.
Why don't we look at that tomorrow? We can do a little Google Meet.
Let's do that.
In there.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm glad that more people use JavaScript, and I like the stuff that I'm seeing, and can't wait for more add-ons and more uses of JavaScript out there. So.
Has FileMaker mentioned anything about adding the ability to update add-ons after they're installed?
They haven't. I don't think they know what they're going to do with that, because it's all it's all that XML that gets ingested into your code base, and they don't know how to update it yet. So I haven't heard anything about it. To me, as long as the tables that come in are not actual your data tables, like they don't turn into your data. Every one of my add-ons, they ingest or they install a sample data table. Mm-hmm. If I ever want to uninstall this, it doesn't bug me to do that, because I know this is completely modular, right? So I don't have to worry about me uninstalling this and losing any real data. And if I did that, I would just uninstall it. I would get the newer version of it and hook it up or push it into the file where it goes to my Finder where it goes, and then just install the new one. But that's a horrible workaround for something that they should figure out on their own.
Well, I think some of the other ones, you actually do have real data in there as well. Like they've got a files one and a notes one or something like that comes with the...
That's right. Yeah, just the regular ones.
Yeah. And so those come from, they come with the app, and so they're not going to get updates to those very often. But if for some reason you needed to take off that attachments one, your tables are going to go with it.
Yeah. So I don't know how they're going to do that yet. So we have to just be careful with updating right away. So, all right. Well, it was good to talk to you all. It's always good to talk to more JavaScript people in FileMaker and see what we were all doing. So, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much. This was really great. The teaching content looks fantastic. And like I said, I'm probably going to download it and work through it just to make sure.
Yeah.
then I know what I'm doing. So,
All right, all. Good to talk.
Thank you guys.
thanks very much.
Bye.